always remember that it is the joy of the Lord that is indeed our strength. Amen. Let there be light. So this summer, when my brother came to visit, he had this book called The Happiness Advantage. And so I asked him if I could look at it, and it was this wonderful book. It has 7 principles from positive psychology that proves that when we're happy, we are actually more successful. So have any of you ever fallen prey in your life at any time to thinking, you know, when I get X, when I get the job, when I get the relationship, when I get the level of health, when I get that shiny new car, then I'll be happy. Anyone ever fall prey to that? I'm talking anytime, not every that. Because now we're enlightened, we don't do that, right? So what Sean Aker, the author of this book, says is that that's just a big myth. He actually starts out with that. That's the myth, that success brings happiness. Actually, happiness brings success. And he actually teaches this in businesses around the world, which you can imagine how that goes over. So I give him a lot of credit for doing that. So this is what he says. When we are happy, when our mindset and our mood are positive, we are smarter, more motivated, and thus more successful. Happiness is the center, and success revolves around it. So this guy is very funny. He said he applied to Harvard and he never thought he'd get in. And then when he got in and he got there, he never wanted to leave. So he was actually there for 12 years. He did his undergraduate work, his graduate work, and then he was a graduate assistant in positive psychology. So he brings together all these studies. This book is very research-based to prove this point that we are actually smarter when we're happier. So now, what psychologists call this, obviously each of us has a different understanding of what happiness is, right? So they call that subjective well-being. So in all these tests, people self-report their happiness level. But one of the things they found is that we kind of have a happiness set point. That no matter what happens to us in life, we get back to that happiness set point. And one of the studies showed that you would think if you had a major accident and you were paralyzed, that would impact your level of happiness for a long, long time. Well, what this study actually showed was that most people who had that happen to them in this study, after an initial period of hardship and adjustment, actually returned to the same level of happiness that they had before their accident. So the good news is, though, we can raise that happiness set point. That's not something that's set and then that's it. We can actually raise it. And one of the things that these researchers talk about is priming people to be happy. So that's just basically giving us a little incentive. So one of the studies that showed, because of these 7 principles, his very first principle is that it is an advantage to be happy. He calls it the happiness advantage. And he has a number of studies that show that. One of the studies was with 4-year-old children. And they put these children in 2 groups. And this is kind of what I was telling Elijah. They put the children in the studies in 2 groups to do learning tasks. So one of the groups just was given the instructions. on what task they were doing. And one of the groups was told, think of something that makes you happy, right before they did the task. So they were given the instructions and then told, now at 4, what do you think they're thinking? You know, the Jell-O I had at lunch, maybe, you know, that candy bar. Not a whole wide range, but they found something to make them happy. And the children who just thought that actually did better, accomplished the task quicker, and had fewer errors. Just in taking that little time to prime themselves to be happy. So I look around the room, and all the 4-year-olds are downstairs, so none of us are 4 anymore. So what does this have to do with us? So he did another study, he cited another study with experienced physicians. And the physician's task was, they wanted to see if priming these physicians for happiness, if helping them get in their little happy place, right, would impact not just the accuracy of their diagnosis, how quickly they came to their diagnosis, but also if it would help them be more flexible in their thinking. Because what he talked about was that doctors sometimes fall prey to something called anchoring, where they look at symptoms, they make a diagnosis, and then even if there's evidence after that that's not the right diagnosis, they don't move off their thinking of that. So they wanted to see if priming doctors for happiness would help them be more flexible in their thinking as well. So they had 3 groups of doctors. Now these are all experienced physicians. They gave them, these are hypothetical patients, a list of symptoms and medical histories. So they had 3 groups. One group was just given the instruction of what they were to do. One group was given kind of neutral medical information to read before. And then one group was primed to be happy. Now, so this was kind of a little incentive, a little bribe, excuse me, to be happy. So thinking of experienced physicians, what do you think they might have given them to prime them to be happy?
More money.
More money. That go through anybody's mind?
More time for golf.
More time for golf. Well, this is how they primed these physicians to be happy. They gave them candy. They gave them candy. So here's the results of these studies. The physicians that were primed to be happy came to the correct diagnosis twice as fast as the other physicians and were 2.5 times less likely to get caught in that anchoring. They were 2.5 times less likely to be unwilling to change their initial diagnosis. Now, he has a lot of studies in this book, but I always try to be a helpful gal. So the reason I tell you this is you might want to take a bag of candy to your next doctor's appointment, right? To help your doctor get in his or her happy place. Just a thought. So this is what Aker says. A quick burst of positive emotions doesn't just broaden our cognitive capacity, it also provides a quick and powerful antidote to stress and anxiety, which in turn improves our focus and our ability to function at our best level. Now, if this is what, Kate said that's why she eats chocolate every day. Paul is up here getting in her happy place. So if this is the benefit of being happy, and we see that it honestly takes so little to get in our happy place, isn't it worth maybe investing a little bit of our time in doing this? So there are some ways that we can raise our happiness set point. This book is full of, what I like about the book is he gives the studies, and then he gives the practical application. Okay, so this is what the studies show. What can you do? So how can we raise our happiness set point? Well, one of the very first things that he mentions is something that will not surprise this crowd, meditation. Meditation. He says that that's one of the best things that we can do to raise our happiness set point. And we all know this, don't we? Because we live in a very chaotic world, and even those of us who tune out to the mainstream media, we're still surrounded by a lot of negativity and chaos, things that can pull us out of our center. And when we meditate, we get back to that centered place. So here's the interesting thing about this is, so Aker says neuroscientists have found that monks who spend years meditating actually grow their left prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain most responsible for feeling happy. So to take time to get in our happy place actually changes our brain structure in a way that then allows us a way to get happier. So I thought that was a pretty powerful reminder to those of us. So gratitude is another one, okay? Studies show that consistently grateful people are more energetic, emotionally intelligent, forgiving, and less likely to be depressed, anxious, or lonely. Is that a pretty good payoff for being grateful? Okay, so I want you to take a second here, and can everybody think of 3 things that they're grateful for? Was everybody able to? That happened in pretty quick order, didn't it? Did that kind of raise your energy level or lower it? And that took all of what, 3 seconds, 4 seconds to do that?
No, just an adjunct to what you're saying. I do aura photography, and I literally have one picture that I did that showed the aura of gratitude.
Wow.
And it came spontaneously. I wasn't trying to do it. I wasn't even looking at it, but the picture just got brighter and brighter and brighter. All of a sudden, I remembered something that I was excited about. As I'm sitting there, and I'm going, just like you're saying, and I just thought, oh, wow, yeah, that's right. Oh, and then I looked at the picture, the box that shows the picture, and the aura was all white and got brighter and brighter and brighter. Now, the proof is in the pudding, guys.
Wow. Yeah. So if any of you didn't hear that, Paula takes aura photography, and as she thought about something that made her grateful, actually her aura became brighter and brighter and brighter. That's pretty powerful. Now, if I had asked you to think of 3 things that give you agita, which is my Sicilian grandmother's word for, something that gives you heartburn or aggravation, could you just as easily have done that? Yeah, I'm not asking you to do that, not asking you to do that. But none of us live stress-free, perfect lives, do we? We all have cares, concerns, things that we're worried about. And yet, we all have an extremely powerful choice to focus on what gives us agita or what we're grateful for. And if we know we get that much bang for our gratitude buck, yeah, it's worth looking into. So here's my question. We know that when we are happy, we are actually smarter, more creative, more solution-oriented. These studies show that, and there's dozens of studies in that book, and there's dozens of techniques of how do you raise your happiness set point, and that's what we're going to be looking at this afternoon in the workshop. Is we're going to look at his other 6 principles, and we're going to look at how to play with raising our happiness set point. But we have a lot of concerns, don't we? We have a lot of challenges in our world. So what does it matter if you or I raise our happiness level and get in our happy place? Well, the next research I'm going to tell you was not out of Harvard. It was actually done by me in Market Commons recently. And I was taking a walk by that big pond. And I stood on the bridge, and I was watching this duck come toward me. Now, as I was watching this duck, I was really struck by the fact that behind the duck's little tail feathers was a little V that started getting wider and wider and wider and wider. Because there were no other geese or ducks or anything around him. And I was looking and I was watching this huge kind of wake go out behind this duck. And I thought, isn't that the same for each of us? Don't we leave a wake wherever we go? And what do we want that wake to be? So this week I was talking to Eileen Foos, and she gave me permission to use this story. And she told me Eileen's the head of our care team and a very compassionate person. And she told me this story about something that happened with her mother. And her mom was not the kindest person to her. And yet, when her mom was ill and dying, Eileen actually, and Eileen's a nurse, so she has stressful work, she actually chose a position close to where her mom lived so that every day she could go over to her mom's house and help her. So one morning before work, Eileen went over to her mom's house and she was helping her mother into the shower. And her mother looked at her and said, "You know, I wouldn't do this for you." And Eileen's response was, "You know, Mom, that's the difference between you and me. I would do it for you and anybody who needed my help." Now, Eileen had such a powerful choice of, did she repay the unkindness she received with unkindness? Or did she choose to repay the unkindness with kindness? Now, who knows how that impacted her mother? She said she kind of saw this, maybe her mother had this aha moment that from being self-absorbed all her life, maybe there was another way to live. But I gotta tell you, Eileen telling me that story changed me, because I'm in the midst of something with my family where I feel like my mother did something very unfair to me. And when Eileen told me that story, it was such a powerful reminder that I get to choose how I respond to that. So that's how her wake impacted me, just by her being who she is and sharing who she is. So every Sunday we sing the peace song, don't we? Let there be peace on earth. Because we have this big global concern, don't we? We care about peace. We care about injustice. We care about these things that are happening. We have concern. And yet we don't sing, let there be peace on earth. And let those terrorists stop doing what they're doing. We don't sing, let there be peace on earth. And let the governments do something to stop this. What we sing is, let there be peace on earth. Let me take this big concern that I have, that I want peace. Let me take that concern and let me take it down to a level where I can do something about it. Let there be peace on earth. And let it begin where?
With me.
With me. So that's why I'm asking you this week, I'm giving you a little home fun assignment, asking you to map yourself to a higher happiness level. This is my challenge for this week. And what I mean by that is meditate. Take your meditation. I know who I'm talking to here. Take your meditation to another level. How can you do that? Is that adding time? Is that bringing your mind back quicker if it wanders than the time before? Whatever that is, maybe just asking yourself that question. This week, how can I take my meditation to the next level? Appreciate, practicing gratitude. How can I take my gratitude practice to another level? One of my favorite quotes on gratitude, and I have this in my study, is by Melody Beattie, where she says, gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. So gratitude, maybe that's just writing a thank you note to someone that you just appreciate having in your life. You know, whatever that amped up gratitude practice looks for you, and pass it on. Pass it on. How do you pass your happiness on? Now, I have this little unspoken rule that I'm pretty polite in traffic. I use my turn signal, and some people know that's one of my pet peeves, of using your turn signal so we know what you're doing. But I also have this little rule that, okay, if there's traffic, I let one person in, because that's my civic duty. But two? No, sorry, sir, you have to wait for the next person. So maybe for me this week, it's like, whoa, maybe I could stretch myself and let two people in front of me. We'll see how that goes, I'll report back. So pass it on, pass it on. So that's kind of the challenge this week. We know that happiness really does make us smarter and more creative. We know that we have a certain happiness set point and that we can raise it. And that who we are and where we are in our happy place does impact those around us. So this is the challenge taken from the peace song. This week, just maybe this week, let there be greater happiness on earth, and let it begin with each of us.
Thank you, Carol. Does everybody feel a little bit better than you did before? Yes. I certainly